The United States pioneered the use of armed unmanned aerial vehicles or drones to kill terrorists after 9/11. For 2 decades, academics have investigated the United States' use of drones. Indeed, data on U.S. strikes is compiled by the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, the New America Foundation, and other monitoring organizations. However, except for UK drones and the Gamma Data Project, there are few datasets that track other countries' drone adoption. To close this knowledge gap, American academics analyzed how a country's specific use as well as constraint of drones affects public perceptions of legitimacy, which researchers believe can influence political officials' use of force abroad. They used the US as a yardstick and added France, which has carried out dozens of attacks in Africa, specifically Mali, since December 2021. As a result, French civilians serve as a useful litmus test for non-American attitudes of drone use. The study used a survey experiment that yielded 3 important conclusions. First, how a government employs and constrains drones can influence perceptions of justifiable strikes in a variety of ways. Second, certain types of drone warfare are seen as more legitimate by Americans and French civilians than others. Finally, the in-group versus out-group effect indicates distinct assumptions that underpin legitimacy views. These data implies that the U.S. counter-terrorism strikes no longer justify how most countries utilize drones, and that the public's judgments of justified strikes are influenced by why and how drones are used. This has significant implications for how nations use drones in the future. Drones can be used tactically, that is, on the battlefields, or as part of a larger military and political plan. Commanders can utilize drones tactically during conflicts with an opponent to achieve specific military objectives, such as defending ground troops, comparable to a patrol or raid. Drones can also be used strategically by politicians to achieve bigger political and military goals. The US deployed drones methodically to dismember Al-Qaeda in Pakistan. Countries can also utilize strikes with varying limits to avoid undesirable outcomes such as civilian casualties. Officials inside a single country establish unilateral restrictions. President Barack Obama set a near-certainty bar of no civilian deaths during U.S. operations in Pakistan in May 2013. States are obligated to meet the supervisory obligations of other countries due to multilateral restraints. The sanctioning of strikes by the United Nations or UN is a well-known international limitation. According to a recent study, such approval is connected with stronger public support and recognized legitimacy for a strike, which is consistent across national borders in France and the United States. Drone use and constraint patterns vary widely, indicating 4 distinct patterns of strikes. To begin, countries can use drone technology strategically and unilaterally. They call this type of drone warfare over the horizon, suggesting that countries utilize strikes to target terrorists without committing ground troops. The US strikes in Pakistan are best described by this paradigm. Second, countries can employ drones for strategic purposes under international constraints, which we term aerial occupation. This tendency, which is evident in US strikes in Libya, enshrines the existence of drones above other countries, threatening to subvert their sovereignty. Third, countries can employ drones tactically in predatory operations, which they described as unilateral constraints. This pattern of strikes is common in intrastate conflicts, for example, Ethiopia, and border conflicts like Kashmir. Fourth, countries can employ legal strikes to utilize drones tactically while adhering to multilateral constraints. One French academic calls this the French model, in which France, like Mali, conducts limited strikes that are diplomatically approved. If you've liked what you've seen so far, make sure to subscribe. So how these patterns of drones warfare impact the public's ideas of what judges a lawful use of force, and why should we care? Legitimacy is significant because it represents public opinions of proper behavior. According to research, the public doesn't question such legal activities, preserving politicians' political capital. This explains why, even when strikes kill people, American authorities frequently describe them as legal and righteous. The folks from the United States performed a poll experiment in France and the United States to see how the public of different nations view the legitimacy of different patterns of drone attacks. Over 1,800 people were randomly assigned to 8 treatment groups and a control group. The treatment groups changed the use or tactical or strategic, constraints, forcible or multilateral, and humanitarian casualty of a fictional country's drone strike. On a scale of 1 to 10, respondents were asked to judge the strike's validity. Several conclusions emerged from their investigation. First, differing forms of drone warfare are perceived as more or less legal by Americans and French residents. The deliberate use of a strike is seen as the most legitimate by Americans, and the sort of restraint is determined by civilian laws. Americans' judgments of legitimacy are constant when an attack is used with unilateral or multilateral restriction and doesn't kill a civilian. When a civilian is killed in a strike, however, multilateralism shapes Americans' opinions of legitimacy. In this sense, French respondents do not distinguish between limitations. In the absence of a civilian loss, French respondents' opinions of legitimacy are highest when an attack is deployed tactically and with multilateral limitation. These findings suggest that while Americans and French respondents may favor different patterns of drone warfare, Americans also support the cloak of multilateralism when they make mistakes. Second, citizens in the United States and France have strong opinions on which strikes are legal. Respondents consider a strike carried out by their own country to be more legitimate than one carried out by another country, and this is especially true among Americans. They also discovered that Americans' favorite model of strikes is 73% likely to be correlated with a sense of national dominance, the highest score among all drone warfare patterns recorded by U.S. respondents. The preferred model of strikes is 42% likely to be connected with a sense of national superiority, the lowest rating for any style of drone warfare among French citizens. They utilized causal mediation analysis to see what assumptions might underpin respondents' opinion of legitimacy, which resulted in a third discovery. Some researchers believe that emotions like wrath or fear impact American and French strike preferences. However, when this idea is tested, the results are mixed. Rather, the American academics put theories about war and multilateralism to the test. According to their findings, numerous core ideas underlie French respondents' assessments of lawful strikes. Around 20% of French individuals believe that armed power has a part to play in international affairs. Another 7.5% reflects French citizens' faith in the great power's responsibility for global security. Nearly 7.5% of French respondents' perceptions of lawful drone strikes are sensitive to human casualties. Meanwhile, the United States emphasizes international law. This is unexpected because, practically by definition, U.S. strikes violate sovereignty. However, other scholars question whether Americans can understand drones as a means of upholding international law. These findings have ramifications for French and American strikes, as well as insights into countries' evolving drone use. First, regardless or because of drone precision, civilian losses substantially influence public opinions of lawful strikes, particularly among Americans. Officials should take utmost precaution to avoid civilian casualties during attacks, which they can achieve by combining unilateral and multilateral limits. By supplementing clandestine conversations with officials from intervening countries with international approval, the Biden administration might improve the perceived legitimacy of U.S. strikes. President Emmanuel Macron might adopt a near-certain norm of no civilian casualties amid French operations following his recent re-election to prevent blunders, which are common in conflict. According to the United Nations, a French strike in Mali in January 2021 killed 19 civilians. Second, the increasing employment of drones in situations like Libya and Ukraine implies that the fate of drone warfare may differ from either French or U.S. counterterrorism strikes. Drone strikes by governments in response to domestic political violence may not pose the same international legal implications as cross-border strikes. At the same time, the lack of multilateral control may make military strikes appear less genuine. This contradiction implies that the global governance difficulty for drones is not solely due to counterterrorism strikes by the US or even France. Rather, it increasingly refers to governments' employment of drones in intrastate and border conflicts, such as the one between Armenia and Azerbaijan. While academics have analyzed the legality and legitimacy of French and US terrorist operations, they should turn their attention to other drone uses that have mostly gone unnoticed until now. Aside from the general public, is a drone strike legitimate in your eyes? What are your personal thoughts and views on drone strikes? Let's know in the comment section below. Watch the video on the screen if you want to know more about how to counter military drones. If you like this video, please subscribe to our channel and click the bell button to never miss an update from us.